Okay, so this is a problem that was asked over email, and it's problem 1.7.66. And you probably can't see that, so let me read it to you and bring it up closer. It says that a ball is thrown vertically upward with an initial speed of 80 feet per second from a cliff 490 feet above sea level. The height s in feet of the ball from the ground after t seconds is negative 16t squared plus 80t plus 490. They want to know for what time t is the ball more than 586 feet above sea level. Okay, so the first thing is this initial stuff that they're telling you about, this 80 feet per second and 490 feet above sea level, that's actually taken into account in this equation. And so what they're telling you is they have this equation s here equal to negative 16 t squared plus 80t plus 490. Okay, and that equation is for s equaling the height in feet above sea level. Okay, and the t is representing the time in seconds after the ball is launched, basically, or the ball is thrown. Okay, it's actually really important that you be able to identify which variable is which, because that's going to help us to determine what we're doing in this problem. So it says, for what time t is the ball more than 586 feet above sea level? What they're asking us when they say, you know, for what time t is it more than 586 above sea level, essentially what they're saying is when, for what time values is this equation right here greater than 586. So they're actually asking us to solve this for time t. Okay. All right, so the way that we're going to do that, first of all, is set it to 0, or set it greater than 0. And we're going to move the 586 over. So I'll subtract 586 from both sides. Okay, so we get negative 16t squared plus 80t, and this will be a negative 96 when we do that subtraction. Okay. All right. Now, this greater than sign, what I'm actually going to do now is, in order to solve this, I need to factor, but I see that I have a greatest common factor here of a negative 16. So I'm actually going to divide everything by a negative 16, and that's going to get rid of that greatest common factor. And what I have to be aware of is when I'm dealing with an inequality and I divide by a negative number, it's actually going to take this inequality sign and it's going to flip it. So right now it's a greater than 0, it's actually going to flip it into a less than 0. Okay, so this is going to become t squared, and then the 80 divided by negative 16, we get a negative 5t. This is going to become a positive 6. And this is where I'm saying 0 divided by a negative number, we're going to end up having to flip that sign, becomes a less than 0. Okay, so this is what we're solving now. All right, so what we're going to do now with this t squared minus 5t plus 6 less than 0, we need to first of all factor this. Okay, so I'm going to use the trial and error method. I'll use t and t and 3 and 2, and both minus signs here. So if both of these are minus signs, that'll work to give me a negative. That'll work to give me a negative 5. And then if I multiply negative 2 times negative 3, it gives me a positive 6. So that one works. Okay. So now, in order to analyze this, because it's an inequality, what I actually have to do is I'm going to take a liberty, and I'm going to set this equal to 0, even though it's not equal to 0. I'm going to set it equal to 0 to find the partition numbers. And then I'm going to divide up the number line into different spaces, and I'm going to check the different spaces for sign. Okay, so I'm going to set t minus 2 equal to 0 and t minus 3 equal to 0. And when I solve these, I get t equals 2, and I get t equals 3. Okay, now these are my partition numbers. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the number line and I'm going to divide it up. This goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. And I'm going to put my 2 and my 3 there. And I know that I'm not equaling either 2 or 3 because I don't have an equal sign here. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to check these intervals. This interval right here from negative infinity to 2. I'm checking the interval from 2 to 3, and then the interval from 3 to infinity. And I'm checking to see what sign do I have in these intervals. So I'm going to choose test points. In this interval, I'm going to choose 0. In this interval between 2 and 3, I'm just going to choose 2.5 because that's the easiest thing. And then in this interval from 3 to infinity, I'll just test 4. Okay? So what I'm doing to test these is I'm actually plugging them, going back up here, and plugging them into this inequality. And I'm seeing, actually I'm just plugging it into this piece of the inequality, and I'm seeing what sign do I get. So when I plug t equals 0 in, okay, what I get is 0 squared plus 5 times 0, excuse me, it's minus 5. Minus 5. Minus 5 times 0 and then plus 6. And I want to evaluate, is this positive or negative? Well, that's 0, and that's positive 6. So this ends up being 6. That's a positive number. So everything in this interval, all values in that interval are going to be positive. Okay. In this interval, I choose t equals 2.5. So when I plug that in, I get 2.5 squared minus 5 times 2.5. and then plus 6. Well, this ends up being right here, 6.25, that value right there. And then this will end up being 12.5, and then this is plus 6. So this is going to end up being negative because 6.25 and 6 is 12.25. Minus the 12.5 will end up being a negative. It's negative 0.25. I don't even care what the number is. I care about the sign. So we're actually negative in this region. Okay? And then when I check t equals 4, plug that in. 4 squared minus 5 times 4 and plus 6. Oops, sorry. So this is 16 minus 20 plus 6. That ends up being a positive number. So everything in this interval is positive. Okay, so now what we have to do is we have to go back and look at what we started with. And we have to ask ourselves the question, which were we looking for, the negative values or the positive values? And right here, if we're looking for this product being less than 0, then we're actually looking for the negative region, because if you're less than 0, then you've got to be negative. So this is actually the region that would solve this inequality. Okay, so when they actually ask the question here, the ball is more than 586 feet above sea level between blank and blank seconds after the ball is thrown. The ball is more than 586 between how many seconds? It'd actually be between 2 and 3 seconds, because that's what we found here. Remember, these are t values, right? So between 2 and 3 seconds, you're going to be above 586 feet above sea level. What's actually happening here is you can kind of see this little picture of a person and on a cliff, and what they're doing is they're throwing this ball and it's going up, but then it's going to come down because, you know, of gravity. So there's going to be some height up here that's, you know, a height of 586 feet, and between a certain period of time is when that is going to be traversing above that height. Okay, so it would be, it looks like between 2 and 3 seconds. Okay.